Welcome back. So now we're going to look at something a bit more advanced. We're going to look at how to create vocally type sounds. We're going to do this by creating our own little custom Formant filter to create vocal effects. In case you're interested in the theory, how this works is that most musical instruments and the human voice has certain resonant peaks and dips called resonances in guitar bodies or a violin body or cello body, and the human larynx has these things. We produce sounds with tonal variation by using the muscles in the throat to vary these resonances against each other. And we're going to use a couple of bandpass filters to simulate a couple of resonant bumps and then move them against each other to create vocally type sounds. So much for the theory. Let's have a look at the practice. First off, let's have a look at Vanguard. As you'll notice in Vanguard, it only has one filter, so that counts it out for this application. But it does have this thing called Formant here, which is one of the filter choices in the filter selector box. And it sounds like this, with less resonance. And there's no way in my book that that qualifies as a Formant filter in any way, shape or form. So we'll just completely ignore that. It's kind of useful as a filter type, but it's not a Formant filter. So moving on to Albino, here we do have two filters, one here and one here. I'm just going to set this up with a basic saw wave here. And I'm going to route it to filter 1 and filter 2 using this switch here. So that now is going to this filter and this filter. If this is the second filter is not switched on, you have to switch it on. And you have to set the balance to 50% to each. So let's just check that. Put the resonance up a little. Great. Let's turn the delay on. So already you can hear if we have one of the filters static, we have some kind of vocally type sound. Better if we go to a bandpass for each one. Now I'm going to set up an envelope to modulate the filters. So let's turn the envelope depth up on filter 1. And that will be filter 1 here. So just put a decay, put the sustain to 0. So this one's staying static and this one is moving in relationship to it. So it gives that kind of vocally sound. Now what we could do, if we wanted to be very clever, is we could put this envelope on 2, filter 2, and do a similar kind of thing, except reverse the filter, so we could just hit the filter reverse button. So we have one filter going down, one filter going up against each other. So there we have the kind of now, of course, if you record the modulation into your sequencer with you freaking out with the cutoff, then you can get some really interesting results. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. What about if we take the envelope depth off and we use an LFO here? So as you can see, I've got LFO 1 here. Let's put it on a positive. Forgive me for that. And if we put this one down, so it's doing the opposite. I'm going to switch the patch to monophonic by putting the voices to 0. There is a huge amount of variation available just by tweaking these two cutoffs against each other. And if you set up your sequencer to record the input, you can get some really interesting sounds for your parts, which you can then audio off and drop into your track. It's important that the filters are in parallel rather than serial. Bit of LFO speed. You can vary it by putting some distortion on. An option in Albino is to pan one filter left and one filter right, so you have a very wide stereo Formant effect. So that in essence is how to set up Formant filter to get vocal sounds. A couple of band pass filters or high pass or low pass filters in parallel. Let's have a look at Zebra. Here we are. So what we have here is a single oscillator going into a band pass filter. Sounds like this. In order to create a Formant type filter, we need two band passes or two filters in parallel. So I'll just turn this one on. And as you can see here, this oscillator is feeding both filters. So now it sounds like this. When you play the resonant peaks against each other. Of course, the same stuff applies about envelopes. So, and we can have the other one going the opposite way. Etc. And same thing applies to LFOs too. So a bit of both gives you So now I'm going to have a tweak around, and I have the arpeggiator switched on in Zebra. And I'll play some chords and have a tweak around and see what I can come up with. Bit of LFO. Now a bit of LFO. Bit of envelope. I think you get the idea. There's a lot that can be done, lots of tweaking available. As you can hear, it's very vocal. While we're on the subject, let's have a look at another synth. This is Omnisphere, and let's see how we could set up the same kind of Formant filter business in this synth. There's a bit more to the filters than meets the eye with Omnisphere. If you go under the hood here with this little magnifying glass, it opens up this filter page. By the way, Omnisphere sounds like this, how I have it set up at the moment, which is just with a bandpass filter. Sounds fabulous. And in order to get our parallel filters, we hit this switch here to move it to parallel. We still have a bandpass filter, but if we move the offset on one side, then move the cutoff, more vocal-like. Let's try a bit more resonance. Try it down an octave. You can hear it sounds more vocal. This control here is quite fun. It moves the cutoffs in opposite directions, so you get a stereo up and down effect. So that's how you do Formant filtering in Omnisphere.